What's up, guys? Ian here, coach of your Ladner Lanturn, bringing you guys our NCL Season 7 recap video. It might be a little bit shorter. I'm very disappointed in myself and how the season went, and if you had been following along, you'll know now, of course, that I did not make playoffs. I was just barely missed out on playoffs. I finished in 9th place, and unfortunately, I just couldn't pull out a win when I needed to. Like, I had 6 losses. I went 6-6. I had a plus 18 differential or something ridiculous, plus 12 maybe. Yeah, I think plus 12. 6-6 plus 12, which is like really good for 6-6. It meant I was losing gracefully and winning in a large way in a lot of my games, which is true. I had a couple 6-0s, but I couldn't pull it out when I needed to. In the end, I only beat one of the 8 playoff teams. I managed to dodge 3, to be fair, but and so that meant that I was playing lower level teams. You know, I was only playing people that were outside of the playoffs for the majority of the season. But not being able to beat anyone that did make it into playoffs besides one person was very disheartening, and essentially just meant that I was going to be in a bad spot in terms of the standings. And I think the actual real, like, death sentence for me was the fact that I couldn't pick up a win against Jed in week 2. But we'll get over that. We'll go over that later. Just that was a very important one because Jed was sitting in a potential relegation spot at the end of the season. He didn't end up relegating, but he was. If the Blitzel coach had gone through that, then he would have had to play a game to relegate. So, not being able to win a game against a team that was doing poorly, Jed's a great coach. Do not get me wrong at all. He just tends to do exceptionally well one season and then very poorly the next. So, that just ended up being a win that I would have needed to make playoffs. Now, who's to say whether or not I would have made it all the way to finals or not? But we'll go over the winner and stuff like that. I've been waiting to record this until after the season was over, which is now done. It just finished last night, so I know the winner, and I've got all that going on, and we'll just get this recorded and uploaded for you guys. So first up, let's run through my draft. This is a sort of a throwback, you know. Last edit was July 15th. It's currently November 1st when I'm recording this, so you know, it's 3.5 months ago that I recorded the draft analysis and stuff like that. So it's interesting to go back and see what I drafted and why I thought it might be good. So I ended up with 2nd pick, and I took Darkrai, which I don't think was a mistake, but I did build very poorly around it. I've had people talk about how Darkrai should just be banned and how it has no place in the standard format, which I completely disagree with, by the way. I think the stats are good. Defensively, they're not great. It's generally the offensive ones that you're looking at because they take up more than a fair chunk of the actual stat pool. But I just did not build very well around it. The other Darkrai team in Blitzel had an amazing team, and that was a little bit handicapped by the fact that there were at least 2 people pretty much just griefing the draft in Blitzel. And so it was really easy to get 4 regen Mons, a Gliscor, and a Mega Mawile, slap them on a team and say, you know, have fun Darkrai, which it did. It had a lot of kills and it was very successful, but it's a lot easier when you can just absorb hits and you have a good defensive core, which my team did not at all. But when I picked up Slowking, things started turning around for me, right? So having the slow momentum and having a solid defensive pivot really helped out, and my drafting definitely did not reflect what I wanted out of this team to build around my 2nd overall Darkrai. I was lucky enough to have Libero Cinderace come back all the way back to me near the round 2 wheel, which I think is just ridiculous. This mon is really strong, and there should have been no reason why it lasted that long. This is definitely the MVP of my team by the end of the season, actually. And it was just a monster. It came to every single game, and it was just really broken pretty much the whole time. So I would say that Cinderace is probably a better mon for my team than Darkrai was, but I was sort of on like the faster speed sort of side. And then Gliscor, which is also just bonkers. This Pokemon was so good defensively for me. the fact that it was tier 2 was just, almost criminal. And the fact that I make these tiers is just, I obviously we voted on a lot of stuff. There will be a change for season 8, which we'll get into once I start uploading season 8 content. But Gliscor was just absolutely phenomenal, and I adored using Gliscor this season. And then Mega Gardevoir, which was actually kind of blah at the beginning of the season, but was a nice special threat to go with Darkrai. In hindsight, I needed more physical offense to go with Cinderace, I think, but having Mega Gardevoir really helped, and it sort of popped off at the end of the season. It was really bleh until week 11, and then it just absolutely popped off in week 11 and 12. It got a ridiculous amount of kills in those two games combined. So it sort of inflates the stats a little bit for 1/6 of the season compared to all of the other games where it didn't even like show up. Because I just felt like Darkrai was better or whatever. So it was kind of competing with Darkrai. I don't know how I really feel about that. I still think my first 4 picks were really solid as a team. Offensive, and then from here, I probably just needed bulk, to be honest, because I could have just ran through teams with Mega Gardevoir, Cinderace, Darkrai, and like a good bulky regen core or something, right? But instead, I decided to pick up Empoleon, which was just an absolute choke. This Pokemon was so bad for me all season. It was not good. I was like, oh, I want a secondary rocker to help out Gliscor. It's a water type, it's a steel type, fills the it's a defogger. Yeah, none of those mattered. None of those mattered at all. Empoleon was good in one singular game. The rest, it was absolute garbage in. And it barely came to games in the back half of the season. We'll look at the stats, but I don't even think that it came to more than 3 games the entire season, if I'm being completely honest. This was just an absolute waste of a pick. I should have just taken Slowking when I had the chance. It was some special bulk to go with Gliscor's physical bulk. So, Slowking would have been some really good special bulk to complement that, and I should have just not cared about the double psychic typing with a Darkrai on my team. Having an actual another like fighting resist to go with Gliscor, but a special fighting resist would have been pretty useful there too. So eventually I did get Slowking, but it was not in the place of Empoleon. It was in the place of something else, which I guess we'll get to. Vikavolt was okay. The webs actually helped out a lot more late season than they did anywhere in the middle of the season. I think Vikavolt was actually pretty solid on this team. It was just unfortunate that it ended up being like my only Rillaboom answer in the game against Torn, because I didn't build a good enough defensive like core to work around. The extra special offense was meh, but like a tier 4 Weber that's like really powerful and a strong electric type, I think I would not. I don't regret this pick, right? Like Vikavolt, I think was really good on the team. Cheston, on the other hand, was just awful, and there were many better options. Amoonguss being one of them that I possibly could have taken like earlier and not had to deal with this, but yeah. Like, Chestnut was really pigeonholed in the first 2 weeks, and then I just stopped bringing it because it was really pigeonholed in the first 2 weeks. All it was doing was it was a defensive wall that Gliscor could have done, but it was just like, oh, I'll just slap a Rocky Helmet on this because Gliscor is forced to have Toxic Orb. And I was really bad about letting Gliscor keep its Toxic Orb early on in the season. But I'd already sort of like determined with the way that I'm building this draft that Gliscor was going to be defensive every single week, right? I'm not confident that I actually brought a Sword Stance set or an offensive set at all. And part of that was because I had pigeonholed Chestnut, and then I started hating Chestnut, and I just dropped it. So Chestnut was really bad, and I probably will never take Chestnut ever again. I took it for spikes, but I ended up dropping Venomoth for Quillfish later, and Quillfish was just the better spiker, like all the way around. Just because an Intimidate user is better typing. All of those things. Toxic Spikes added to it. It was a grounded poison, things like that. So Chestnut was just way outclassed, and again, a bad pick. Golurk was kind of a bad pick too, if I'm being completely honest. I didn't really need another ground. It ended up like stopping fire types from wanting to come against my team pretty much at all by the end of the season when I had triple water, double ground. Fire types just did not want to come against me. But yeah, I'm like a big fan of Golurk, and I still am a big fan of Golurk, but I just don't think it fit on this draft in particular. And I think you do end up finding more value for Golurk in points than tiers. Like, it's a really good tier 5, but I think what you want out of a tier 5 is maybe less of a breaker. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what I would want out of a tier 5. But like Suicide Web support or something. Uh, yeah, I've learned a lot drafting since then. My drafting at the beginning and middle of this year was just really not good, and my drafting I think has improved tenfold, which is actually starting to help me win a lot more games. So I regret a lot about this draft, especially the Dracozolt, which was also bad. I didn't need the electric type. I was just like, oh, I need the dragon. But no, Dracozolt was terrible. Hustle is an awful ability, and I'm never going to take this fucking Pokemon again. Um, unless I'm pairing it with like Sand. But even then, it's like you want the Hustle boost for Bolt Beak. Like it's just got such middling stats, and it's just not good. And I don't think the Dragon is necessary anymore. So I'm like on the fence about drafting dragons in general, let alone Dracozolt, and I would never take this Pokemon again ever. Venomoth, I adore Venomoth. I think it's a fantastic Pokemon, and it didn't fit this draft at all. The idea is that it was Toxic Spike support, right? It was another special sweeper, which is just completely irrelevant on this team. There's already so much special offense. And it should have just been another pick. I already have another bug type, so completely irrelevant there. And it's not a bug type that resists ground, so what's the fucking point? Um, I think what I wanted out of Chestnut was a ground resist in the end, and I just decided to scrap that fucking plan later on. And I was like, no, don't bother with the ground resist. I've got a Gliscor, I've got a Vikavolt. Those will be my ground resists, right? Especially Gliscor. It's just whatever. I'll switch into Gliscor on the ground types. It's pretty much irrelevant. Most ground types, besides like Mammoth Swine, don't really have a great way to hit Gliscor. In fact, I can't really think of a better, like maybe Hippowdon with like Ice Fang. Yeah, you're looking at like really bad coverage, right? And then Regice was also phenomenal in one game this season. It's more special offense, and the thing is I really wanted a special wall to go with Gliscor's physical wall and Chestnut's physical wall, and Regice was probably also not the play. You know, it did come in clutch in my week 1, but Glaceon was just a much better option for my team later on in the season. And I think it shows that I used all of my free agents and then had to ask someone to make a free agent for me and trade it to me, how bad this draft ended up being. So I really liked the changes I made to this draft, and I hated the actual draft itself. So it started off amazingly, but that's because I just got a really phenomenal matchup week 1, and I probably should have looked at dropping stuff after that week, but it took me a couple weeks to figure out what I wanted out of the team, and that was sort of my downfall this season. So yeah, we're done with this. So let's move on to the doc. Amish is your winner of season 7. Really cool that he was the number 8 seed coming in all the way through and bodying finals. To be honest, finals was not a close game at all. His two other games, his quarterfinals game was very close. It came down to 1%. Potentially, if the Obstagoon gets a higher roll against his Zelmise, that he loses the game. Like right at the end, it was Delmise versus Obstagoon. Obstagoon throat chops the Delmise, and the Delmise power whips the Obstagoon. So right, if the power whip misses, or if the throat chop gets a slightly higher roll, it did like minimum. I would imagine a minimum roll. Delmise is not designed to take on an Obstagoon's dark type hit. And then against Lux, it was also a really close 1-0 game for Amish. So big congrats to Amish for winning. He played phenomenally all season. He definitely abused the hell out of Indeedee in the regular season and then didn't bring it at all in playoffs. Garchomp ended up being really solid for him in playoffs. And then he beat Howler, who also had a pretty good season. I wouldn't necessarily say it was the best. There were a lot of games where it was kind of iffy, lots of hacks-induced games. And I'm also just not a fan of Mega Venusaur or watching Mega Venusaur. And when I watched it, it really did nothing the entire season. Like another defensive Mega could have done the exact same thing that Mega Venusaur did the entire season and done it better. All it did was it was defensive and it never did anything besides like leech seeding stuff. I just feel like there's a better value than a tier 1 mega for that sort of thing. But I felt like Howler played pretty well. Ashker Ninja picked up way too many kills. A lot of them unfounded, especially against Lux. He got like a freeze, and then Ashgren got a bunch of kills. And then there was a meme match in week 12 where Ashgren got a bunch of kills because it literally wasn't a meme set at all. Torn beat Brian in the quarterfinals of playoffs. Brian took over for Vanderl, who had an undefeated season at the time. I think Torn played really well this entire season. Stu played pretty well for most of the season. There were some games where he's just like not playing super well, and his builds are always questionable for me. But um, Howler managed to beat him off, right? Beat him. My God, beat him right at the beginning, and then Pokefan versus Lux. Lux had a very favorable matchup, and Pokefan brought this one really close with a good build. In terms of the rest of the season, here's the standings. I was just on the outside of playoffs, as you can see, at 6-6. Playoffs was 7-5. So, I mean, there's not much I can do there. I needed to win another game to be able to make it into playoffs. There were a few scenarios where I could have made it in, but unfortunately, my loss to Lux ended Destiny being in my hands. And I just needed Mike to beat Stu at the end of the season for me to make it in, and Stu managed to beat Mike. So, not much to do there. I had like a 1-0 loss to Hamu, and I lost to Jed down here. And like I played all of these people, right? Like I played Hamu, I played Aaron, I got the FF win off of Gareth because he dropped. I beat Joey, I beat Magic, and I beat Austin. And then I lose to Hamu and I lose to Jed. And one of those games is the determining factor for me making playoffs, right? But then I also lost to Stu. I also lost to Amish. I also lost to Torn. And I also lost to Lux, and I beat Pokefan. So, like, there's no real reason that I deserved playoffs because I just couldn't beat the people ahead of me in the standings, and that's just unfortunate at the end of the day. My highest kill leader ended up being Mega Gardevoir. By the end of the season, 13-4 in 6 games. So, like, it was really good at the end of the season, but 11 of those kills, I think, happened in the last 2 weeks, which just very disappointing to see that because Cinderace probably deserved to be my top kill leader by the end of the season. But let's run through my team and my page here. So we ended the season. We ended up dropping some stuff here, right? So Chestnut we dropped for Lucario, Venomoth we dropped for Quillfish, Dracozolt we dropped for Slowking, and Regice we ended up dropping, and then Austin dropped something for Glaceon and traded us for Regice. Okay, so this was our final team at the end of the season. Lucario was pretty phenomenal. I'm not gonna lie. It was a really good offensive threat, and I wish that I had just had it earlier and maybe not had Empoleon, which came to 5 games. I did not know that, and it was really bad. Slowking was also phenomenal. Just a great defensive Pokemon for me. Excuse me, Quillfish actually went undefeated when I had it, so I liked the Quillfish edition, and Glaceon was really good in the one game that it managed to come to. Excuse me. So, pretty solid team all the way around. I really did not get that many kills on things. If you're looking at this, right, like 13 on Gardevoir, 11 on Cinderace. I only got 6 on Darkrai in 9 games. 2 on Gliscor in 10 games, right? Lucario picked up some of the slack, but Vikavolt only got 3 and 7, Golurk 1 and 4. So I just didn't have the... Like, these were my breakers, and that's what I should have built around, was Mega Gardevoir and Cinderace being breakers, or cleaners, or whatever, and then building a solid defensive team around it. Because I would have had just way more success with it, just based on this scoreline. I would have won more games, because I would have had better defensive answers to things, and I still would have had the offensive power, so it's very disappointing. This is how my schedule looked, right? So the first half of the season I was 2-4, and then the second half of the season I managed to go 4-2. Now I did have a much easier, in theory, second half of the season, okay? But I finished against 3 playoff teams. So the first half of the season I won against 3 non-playoff teams, and then I finished against 3 playoff teams. But in my first half of the season, I only played 2 playoff teams in Amish and Stu. So I should be winning one of those games if I want to make playoffs, right? So yeah, this went pretty poorly. This season was really bad. It was not my worst performance. Season 6 was my worst season ever, and I'm reasonably happy with the fact that 6-6 is my worst season ever. But I would still like to make playoffs in my own damn league, you know. I still haven't won. We're heading into season 8, and I still haven't won my own league, so I'd like to advance past semifinals for the first time in a while. So in terms of prep, I'll just like maybe more briefly touch on this, but Austin we managed to 6-0. This is a pretty easy game for a 6-0. Darkrai didn't even like have to hit the field. I think Regis got 3. I froze a bunch of stuff. I've got the team here. Regis got 3. I froze a bunch of stuff. Webs went up, and it was really solid. Restock Regis was there for the Kyurem, which was an absolute menace against the rest of my team, which shows you the lack of special bulk. Now, granted, Kyurem would have just blown through Slowking anyways, but the lack of special bulk on my team really required me to bring Regis to deal with Kyurem. And Empoleon got a kill or something. I think Gliscor got a kill somewhere. It's like a really strange Gliscor set with Firefang, Facade, but it ended up working out. The Scissor didn't even come, so Firefang was relevant. And what else? Oh yeah, I didn't miss a single Pyro Ball all season. I ran Flare Blitz this game, like, oh man, I'm gonna miss Pyro Ball, and then I never missed a single Pyro Ball the entire season. Darkrai was actually set up in a good spot to go in on this one, but it didn't manage to even see the field, I don't think. Anyways, that was a 6-0. Week 2 against Jed. The Galarian Slowbro ended up being a problem because Mega Gardevoir like ran through this team, but the Galarian Slowbro sort of stopped in its tracks, and I had to waste Destiny Bond on the Galarian Slowbro. Where is it? I had to waste Destiny Bond on the Galarian Slowbro. Expanding Force was kind of cool, just as like tech for the Lele, because Expanding Force would have just like blown through a lot of stuff on this team. But the special Mega Charizard X caught me a little bit off guard. The Galarian Slowbro caught me off guard. I didn't have good enough answers to Lele because, again, my special bulk was not good. So I'm looking at AV and Empoleon for that, right? And Chestnut was like forced to be Rocky Helmet defensive for the Urshifu Rapid Strike. So there are a lot of bad things going on at this point in the season, and this is essentially where I stopped bringing Chestnut, although I did bring it in the next game as well. I just forced it on the team. So it's like coming as a defensive Pokemon, right? It's fully physically defensive against Amish for the Garchomp. It's a really good Garchomp answer. It was a really good Lopunny answer. And it put in work, you know, it sat there and it like did a bunch of damage to the Delmise with Rocky Helmet chip and things like that. Empoleon also had to come because it's my special wall. Like, this is so dumb that I have to bring Empoleon to these games when it's my special wall against the Toxtricity. Like, it's just, the Toxtricity didn't even come, but like, or the Indeedee, which I also prepped for because it was getting a lot of kills in the first 2 weeks. I don't remember even what lost me this game. I'm going to be completely honest. I don't remember what I did wrong in this one. I think I had like Combine Gardevoir set up, and then it was ready to get a bunch of kills, and I was scared of like fake out damage from the Mega Lopunny or something, because like fake out U-turn from Mega Lop would have killed me or something like that, and so I didn't go for a kill on something, but I should have just like claimed the kill and then had Chestnut in the back for it or something like that. Yeah, I do remember that Combine Guard was like really solid in this matchup, and it just ended up doing nothing. I wanted to get Webs up, and I never had the opportunity to get Webs up because Webs would have been phenomenal here. Dracozolt missed at the end of the game. I remember that. And I had to take like 50-50s against Garchomp for Vaporeon, and then Darkrai, I remember, probably did nothing as well. I was trying to like force Hypnosis, and that was really bad. Stu, I also don't remember pretty much anything about this game. I think I tried Bulk Up Cinderace and it didn't do anything, and like Life Orb Darkrai maybe did something. I don't remember what happened. I know I lost a Combine Coco because I had nothing to outspeed Coco. I was counting on. No, I wasn't even counting on Webs. I was counting on Gliscor, I guess, but physically defensive Gliscor. You just, you know, when Coco gets like player off and stuff, you just think that it's going to be physical. But my special bulk is bad, so why would he not be special? It was a stupid assumption. I really don't remember most of these games. This was a while ago. I do remember Slurpuff. Yeah, Slurpuff was like weird. I didn't understand why you'd bring Webs. So here's the thing, right? Like, he lost if I reversed Webs on him, and I opted to bring Bulk Up instead of Court Change on Cinderace at the last moment. And that's a really bad risk to take if you're him. Like, the Webs itself don't give you that much of an advantage against me because Coco already naturally outspeeds things. So you just have to deal with Scarfers with your defensive walls, okay? That's just a more reliable way to handle Scarfers with your team, or you hope that I don't have Scarfers, which I did not have a Scarfer to deal with Coco, okay? And you don't bother bringing webs, which were completely irrelevant at the end of the game. And obviously, I could have brought like defog on something, okay? Or I did bring defog on Empoleon, but I never got a chance to click it. But if I just core change, then what does it matter? The Slurpuff's webs are on his side of the field, and he just then loses because the Coco's slower than all my other stuff, or the Heracross is slower than all my other stuff, or the Salazzle is slower than all my other stuff. So that was really whack, and that was pretty much consistent for and like Stu, if you're watching this, I don't want you to take this as me like flaming you, but a lot of coaches that I talked to just talked about how unpredictable you were, which is probably a good thing. Um, but some of the unpredictability is just like bad sets. Like that Slurpuff set is not good against this team. And I will vehemently argue against that. I do not think that Slurpuff set was the correct one. And I don't even think that Slurpuff was the play against my team. I don't remember what I thought was going to come in the heat of the moment. But going back to watch the team builder, I think there was probably a better option than Slurpuff against this team. It's an okay Darkrai check, but I felt like I don't remember what else there was. I think maybe AV Regirock or something. Um, yeah, it's hard for me to remember. But I do remember thinking that was pretty whack. Week 5, we took on Joey, and this was a shellacking. He had nothing for Darkrai. He didn't bring a single resist, besides Glare and Wheezing, which dropped to something else early on. I had Cool Fish at this point. So I'd made my drops. Lucario was amazing. Yeah, Lucario was amazing. It picked off stuff with Bullet Punch at the end of the game, Banded Bullet Punch at the end of the game. It kind of just like got kills. The fact that Moltres didn't come meant that my Lucario was just set up to just probably win. There was not that much going on in this game because I think he didn't have a Cinderace answer either, and I could run Adamant Powerball against his team, which was just really devastating. And Darkrai had absolutely no switch-ins with Specs Dark Pulse, so Joey didn't really stand a chance. It's a really poor matchup for Joey, I think. And the fact that Kieran Black can't run Dragon Dance just really, really hindered this team a little bit against me. I think Galarian Weezing, I don't remember what Galarian Weezing got bought by, but it was maybe like a Powerball from Cinderace. I just remember this being a pretty easy game overall. Week 6 was against Hamu, and this was just an impossible game to prep for, honestly. He was memeing at the time. He's basically given up on the season at the time, right? So he's basically just like throwing weird sets together. So we played against Special Mega Aggron. There was like Will-O-Wisp, Will-O-Wisp, Water Move, Mew. I don't remember what the Water Move was. It was a really strange Mew. The Clef was unaware for Darkrai, which just made it impossible to absolutely break this team. Archeops was like Rocky Helmet or something. No, I don't think it was Rocky Helmet, but it was like Roost or something strange. I don't even remember what the Greninja was. I know it had Low Kick from Empoleon. So yeah, this was a weird matchup in the first place. I had an amazing matchup initially with my initial team against Hamu's initial team, and then we both made drops, and it sort of made it a little bit more even. So this ended up being a 1-0 for Hamu, because my Cinderace ended up getting burned when I was U-turning on the Mew. And I just couldn't buy I couldn't buy a crit against that thing. Lucario could have done something. Dracozolt was just a waste of space. I think I even just like missed against this team and I died for free. Empoleon was useless. Again, this is my fucking special wall, right? Like, so bad. So I believe Empoleon was gone after that. Yeah, it looks like it was. I had Slowking for Dracozolt, and I just stopped bringing Empoleon to games after that point, I think. Yeah, you don't see Empoleon in any of those games, because Slowking is just better, and it comes to all 5. So, yeah. Now we're in the second half of the season, right? Playing as Aaron. This is a relatively difficult one prep-wise, because he's got some good breakers in the G-Darm and the Lando Eye and the Mega Blastoise, but he ended up bringing a Mega Blastoise that was walled by Gliscor, which I thought was really interesting, and I brought Spadef Gliscor, which is not a great Spadef wall when you've got a Slowking, but Slowking was just a better G-Darm answer. And besides that, I think Cinderace did some work, and Darkrai maybe clicked some buttons. I don't recall. I think Cinderace got most of these kills, but yeah, the Rest Talk Blastoise that was walled by Gliscor was just pretty good for me, and that it ended up just making this game tremendously easier for me, and I don't remember struggling very hard in this one. Week 8, we took on Magic, and this one I made a really good prediction. I won this one heavily. I made a really good prediction against his Dracovish. I was in with like Gardevoir against Suicune, I want to say, or was it Zebstrika? It was Zebstrika or something, and I clicked Hyper Voice, and he doubled into Dracovish, and it just died. And that was the end of that, right? Because, again, this is another matchup where I have to be Rocky Helmet Slowking, but Dracovish was a threat besides that. If Slowking died, then Dracovish was just going to beat me. So he just, like, sacked it for free. I killed Suicune for free or something. This was... I had to sack something later on in the game to the Floette. I had to sack Gardevoir to the Floette to scout and see if it was Scarf, and then be able to tell, or I had to sack Darkrai to the Floette, that's what it was, to see if it was Scarf so that I could get in something else to resist it, like Cinderace or something like that, to clean up the game. Again, this is not a very strenuous game. Gareth, this was an FF win, unfortunately at the drop. Week 10, we played Torn, and this was a closer game than I thought it was going to be. I thought that this matchup was actually really bad for me. The Nidoking actually wasn't much of a problem, despite the fact that it picked up a bunch of kills. Most of those, I was like 3%, right? I'm like a really low percentage. The Nidoking was held in check really, really well by Slowking that game. I handled the Nidoking really, really effectively with the Slowking. And then late game, it just came down to me with like Slowking plus Scarf Glaceon against Scarf, Nidoking, Specs Blacephalon, and like a Florges, okay? And just, unfortunately, the Florges was specially defensive, I want to say, to handle Darkrai, which didn't come. And that was kind of bad on my part. What was even worse on my part is that I ended up getting paralyzed with my Cinderace against the Registeel. So I wasn't able to kill the Registeel, and I managed to get a Thunder Wave off, which probably just ended the game, because this Cinderace was really good against him. And I had Sucker Punch on Blacephalon as he doubled into Florges. And I stayed in, and I just died to Moonblast. So that ended up being really bad, but because I was paralyzed, I didn't really think it was worth doing anything about that. He was like Banded Rillaboom, which just blew my team apart. Banded Woodhammer just dropped Vikable. I could have handled Banded Grassy Glide over and over again, but he swapped it up to Woodhammer at one point, and my Vikable just dropped. Lucario, I don't remember if it even did anything. Actually, yeah, it killed the Mega Slowbro, which I thought was pretty impressive. Lucario's it impressed me a lot this season. Week 11, we took on Pokefan, and I noted that he had absolutely no hazard removal besides Torkoal, which matched up very poorly. A defensive fire against double ground, triple water, just not good. Just not good. So I kind of identified that early on. A couple weeks before, like basically once the transaction deadline had done, I made a note on my prep doc about how his hazard removal was so poor. And it basically relied on Mega DNC, like magic bouncing stuff back. So I pressured him in a way in this game where where DNC couldn't Mega Evolve while I was setting up hazards. So I managed to get my webs off, and I managed to get 3 layers of spikes up. And I spammed Taunt with Quillfish and Gliscor, and I basically just wore down the Regen Core. I managed to crit the Celesteela at one point with Gardevoir's Thunderbolt, but Gardevoir was way too good against this team with the Regen Core chipped, and I 6-0'd this game. It was not close at all. I could just teleport with Slowking around. Darkrai did absolutely nothing, although it was also a threat, and Gardevoir just picked off a lot of kills really, really easily. At one point, I was terrified of DNC because it 2-shot my entire team. I had nothing that could tank 2 Moonblasts that would also tank an Earth Power. So Moonblast was Earth Power was all of the coverage that he needed on the entire squad, and I think he was Calm Mind or something as well, or Magnet Rise, or he wasn't Magnet Rise, but he was Calm Mind. Anyways, either way, I just was pretty terrified of it, and I ended up being able to get up webs before I could bounce them back. Excuse me, which meant that Gardevoir just outsped the entire team. And then against Lux in the last week, I actually thought I had a pretty solid game plan going in, with like Slowking as sort of a mixed defensive wall that could handle Salamence, and it ended up not being able to handle the Salamence. I misplayed against the Mence. Oh, he was like Trick Room Mega Mawile, right? And I had to sack something. I think I sacked the Golurk, which actually looked pretty solid against his team. I don't exactly remember what else happened in this one. But I do remember that I had the Bents locked into Outrage, and then what I could have done after swapping a Gardevoir was go into Slowking to scout what other coverage it had. And it did have Steel Wing for my Gardevoir. So I was like convinced, right? Because I knew I didn't die to Earthquake. And I thought that it would have Roost. But it was just Dragon Dance's 3 attacks. So at least I think it was Dragon Dance. I'm pretty sure it was Dragon Dance's 3 attacks. And so I should have scouted for the Steel Wing. And I could have been in a much better position. Possibly won this game. Possibly. I'm not going to say that it was definite, right? But it was much more possibly. He ended up bringing Worry Seed Serp that set up, let his Salamence set up because I didn't have a Fairy move after he Worry Seeded on my Gardevoir. That was just really good prep on his part. I actually think I had a decent matchup against this, but his really good prep of the Serp into Dragon and Salamence just sort of ended my playoff hopes. So that was all of that. And then last but not least, let's talk about the performance of these Pokemon. So Mega Gardevoir's first of the team that I drafted. It's first on my all-time performance list. It's not even close to actually first, but it was first on this. So it's a 19 kills now, or 20 kills, sorry, 20 kills, 14 deaths, 18 games played. I've drafted it 3 times. I would probably take Mega Gardevoir again. It was a really good breaker. I would probably just want to draft the better team around it. Golurk is next, and it pretty much did nothing all season, but I've drafted it a bunch of times, so it's up there in the kills. Not great. I would definitely draft it again, but not on this team, not this style of team. Gliscor was absolutely fantastic. I would definitely take Gliscor again. Very good defensive Pokemon. Cinderace, also fantastic. Very good offensive Pokemon. Definitely would take that again. Vikavolt, another really good Pokemon that I would definitely take again. I have taken it again. I have it in a bunch of places. It comes to a bunch of games, doesn't get a ton of kills, but it's decent utility these days with webs. Slowking, absolutely fantastic, especially defensive Pokemon. Definitely would take that again. Glaceon, I keep taking it and I keep loving using it in this gen. It's so good this gen. Because you kind of need ice types to beat grounds now that there's no hidden power. So if you're pairing it with a good electric, Glaceon is really good at just like beating the grounds down, and it's actually got some decent defensive utility. It's pretty decent physically defensively. Regice, also a really good specially defensive Pokemon. I've used Regice a few times now, and it's not fantastic, but it's not terrible either. Darkrai, I would want to give another chance. It's probably just not my style of Mon, though, if I'm being completely honest, or I just didn't build around it properly. It's kind of just like a click of buttons Pokemon. At least in my games, it never had the opportunity ever to set up a nasty plot except against Samu's team, which was the Unaware Clef team. So take that as you will. I think it was a lot more pressured than Slick's Darkrai was ever, and it helps that Slick has slow momentum to get Darkrai in really easily with like Teleport Slowbro, things of that nature. Mienshao. Even fast fast momentum with like Mienshao U-turning on a Psychic type, and then you can bring in Darkrai really easily. So those are things that I definitely think should have been on my team that I didn't have. Lucario was really good. I would definitely take that Pokemon again. It was my first time trying Lucario, and it exceeded my expectations tenfold. And we keep going down here. And Empoleon, I probably will never ever take again. I picked it up mid-season in PTL, and it was fine because I already had a defensive core around it. But it was not good as an initial draft. And so I'm never ever going to take it again as an initial draft. What I should have done was target a Steel in a lower tier, like Registeel or something like that, and then take in Slowking as the water instead. Which I now know, because slow momentum's broken. So taking either Slowking or Slowbro is just way too easy, because Teleport is just nuts. Coolfish, another Pokemon that I've drafted a couple times now. It hasn't come to a ton of games, but the utility that Coolfish brings is just impeccable. Dracozolt, I will never ever take again. That Pokemon is terrible. Chestnut, I'm never ever going to take again. That Pokemon is terrible. And that is the bottom of the list. So, hopefully you guys enjoyed the Season 7 recap. We will be back for Season 8. Some fun things for Season 8. We're moving from flat tiers to split tiers. And they're also going to be usage-based. So, if a Pokemon like What's a good example? I mean, Excadrill didn't get drafted this season at all, but like Excadrill was drafted consistently for many seasons. Okay, what's a better example? Maybe I can't really think of a better example off the top of my head of a tier 1. Zygarde. Celesteela. Let's go with Celesteela. Celesteela gets drafted all the time. There hasn't been a season without Celesteela. Celesteela would move up to like 1+, okay? Because it's been drafted all the time. It's valuable enough that people should be willing to pay more points for it, okay? Or if it doesn't get drafted there, it would then move back after a couple seasons to just a regular tier 1, and then if it gets drafted again, then it can move back up again. So the values will change based on people's preferences, and I really like this idea. I think I've been planning it for a while. It's been like 4 seasons in the making, and we're finally getting around to doing it just because there's finally a break in Game Freak releasing new content. The release of Crown Tundra and Isle of Armor this year really threw a wrench into my plans for Season 7 because I wanted to do usage tiers for Season 7. But now that both DLCs are out in Season 8 and we know exactly what moves everything gets, F to Coco, that absolutely should not have been allowed to run Play Rough all season. But that is the plan for Season 8. We'll be back with Season 8 in the new year. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and I hope you stick around for 2021 when I come out with NCL Season 8.